Yeah, I thank you everyone for tuning in. We've had 2 hours, or actually 2 years of negotiations, and it's coming down to about 2 hours and 24 hours to get the final deal worked out with the DOH. John will be going through some of the updated materials since the last time that we provided information, and hopefully everyone can see the slides appropriately. I'm going to hand it over to John.
Okay. Good afternoon. Just before we get started, Kathy, I'm having trouble advancing the slides.
Just go ahead and click on the very first one.
Okay, I did.
And then scroll through.
No, it's not doing it.
It's not doing it. Okay, can I do it for you? And you can just tell me when to advance just so we can get started.
That'd be fine.
Okay. So we'll go ahead to screen one.
Okay, as you all know, it's been a couple of years, as Raul pointed out. This has been a long, involved process, and I think as of this morning when I spoke to the Department of Health, Matt Leonardo at the Department of Health, that this is finally coming to a conclusion. The first slide you'll see is a recap of the settlement. I think you all, you have it in front of you. You can see what's involved. Basically what's happening is that the Department of Health is seeking to resolve all the rate appeals, and in return you get a share of the $850 million pie that has been established from the payment sources you see below, which include the litigation settlement set-asides that DOH already has, $250 million from the statutory appeals cap, and $350 million from the alternative cost containment funds. That's the additional 0.8% cash receipts assessment. Regarding the appeals, you'll see that you're giving up your right to challenge most of your currently pending rate appeals, as well as litigation, as well as a number of other things that you can see set forth therein, like case mix, Medicare Part Bs, and certain other elements, global Medicaid cap, and the right to challenge the cost containment. Next slide. Right now, the document, the formal settlement agreement is being revised. Apparently this past weekend, the Department of Health entered into further negotiations with the associations and the Department of Division of Budget regarding one aspect, which we'll get into in a moment, one aspect of the settlement agreement involving the 0.8% additional cash receipts assessment funding. Facilities representatives were not entirely happy with the original provisions, and you'll see why in a moment, but that's been renegotiated. We have not seen what that term will be. The new terms will be, however, Department of Health and the associations were apparently satisfied. Division of Budget, not so much. They have until the close of business today to decide whether they agree or not. If they don't, the matter will be taken to the governor's office for final resolution. The impact of that, yes.
John, I was going to say, if the Division of Budget agrees to this, this is going to work out very, very quickly. So you can expect through the health commerce system, most likely, to see the settlement agreement with all of these appendices that are here. So it's going to be a very intensive document. We've got a version of it on our data room, and we'll send everybody invites to get into that data room so you can see, before this all hits the fan, probably by this Friday, what the agreement looks like. It's a very lengthy agreement, and there are all of these appendices which are critical for everyone to take a look at once you do get this. Accounts receivable balance, you'll see an appendix for your facilities, receivables balance over at DOH. Significantly, Appendix C will be the excluded rate appeals, which we've been working with facilities to get DOH to include as many of the rate appeals that we believe should be excluded on their listing. But it's been, there have been mistakes, so take a look at that carefully. once you do see it on the health commerce system. Excluded litigation and excluded audits and audit items, and those are the OMIG audits. So there will be a lot of specificity that you should take a look at in advance before this comes to pass, because there's going to be very, very little time frame and no opportunity really to negotiate anything further unless there's some blatant mistakes relating to this. So the timetable, I know it's not the best of situations, not as organized as it could be. However, DOH and DOB wants this to conclude before December 5th, and unless the governor intervenes, this schedule will come to pass very, very quickly. Go ahead, John.
Yes, that's right. It's a December 5th deadline. The reason for that is the Department of Health is hoping to turn around its determination of universality within a week to 2 weeks after that, and they are hoping to be able to make the first payment before the end of this year, this calendar year. So if they can get all these releases and the agreements back in an appropriate form, they hope to be able to go forward to make the first payment before December 31st, the second payment in the last quarter of 2015-16. Next slide.
The other item I think there to acknowledge, 60 days is beyond, December 1st, beyond this year. However, they probably, once they determine that there's universality here, they will likely draw down on federal monies before the end of this quarter, which is the third quarter for the state. The fourth quarter would be first quarter of next calendar year. Go ahead,
Jan. Now, when you get your agreement, as Raul said, these are supposed to be going out by Wednesday, assuming the Division of Budget approves. Once you get it, there are certain of those appendices that are very important to consider. That would be C, which is the excluded appeals, E, which is the excluded litigation, F, which is the discontinued audit matters, and your Medicaid liabilities, which is the Appendix B. Take a look at these. See if you agree with what's there and with what you presented previously. I have to tell you that according to the Department of Health, as of this morning, these are now going to be set in stone. As Raul said, unless there's a blatant error, that is it. There will be no further negotiation on those appendices. So you have to take that into consideration if you decide to accept the settlement or not. As far as your liabilities are concerned, take a look at those. Those are as of June of this past year. That's what's going to be printed out there. It will not show all of the payments that you've made to date through either withholding or actual payments to the Department of Health to reduce your liabilities. However, my understanding is that they will take that into account when they make their withholding from your first payment to liquidate those liabilities. As you see on the screen, up to 70% of the first installment can be used for that liquidation. So take a look at that. Make sure all your payments are reflected and all your recoupments are reflected in that listing. Next slide. One of the items, which is the one that's being discussed, was discussed over the weekend to seek resolution and more definitive statement of what was attempted to be addressed in the agreement, relates to the $350 million coming from the cost containment assessment, that additional 0.8%. As I said before, once you sign the agreement, you are waiving your right to challenge this assessment. However, there are others out there that may, who are not participating in this, challenge it. Should they be successful, or if a federal agency looking over the settlement, such as CMS or perhaps more importantly OIG, the Inspector General, determine that it's not appropriate and disagree with that continuation of that assessment, then you will still be required to pay that additional assessment as a participant. The state will then have to determine if there's any shortfall in the recoupment of that. In other words, this $350 million is coming from you and your collections and the receipts that the Department of Health receives for this additional 0.8%. I think that to the extent that there becomes a shortfall in any particular year, the state will be either reducing their payment on the settlement in like amount, or more likely they will pay out the correct amount, but then seek additional assessment through recoupments from your payments to make up the difference. So you're essentially going to be paying yourselves this portion of it from the additional assessment. Next slide. The third important issue to be concerned with is the releases. We have not seen copies of these releases, although I understand we will be given them tomorrow to review to see if we have any objections. But again, I doubt that additional changes to them will be entertained. The releases will be for current owners, and as you can see, there's basically 5 sets of distributees who have to provide or should provide releases. Current owners of facilities operating under the facility's original number, and you can see that you're certifying that you are the only person or only operator of the facility and therefore are entitled to your amount, and you hold the state harmless from any and all claims by others. As far as current owners who have a different MMIS number, that would result, of course, from a sale or transfer. You're going to also have to release the state from any and all liability from current or prior owners should you receive the settlement funds. Next slide. And now you're into the old owners. Former owners, there's 3 sets of them. There's the closed facility, the owner that operated under a different MIS number, and the former owner that operated under the facility's original MMIS number. These people are entitled, perhaps, based upon your sale and transfer agreements, to a portion of the proceeds of this distribution. You will be asked they will be asked to provide, if they wish to partake in the settlement for their distributive share, they'll have to also provide releases to the state, waiving, holding the state harmless from your claims and the claims of any other former owners. And this sets forth the individual requirements that the state's looking for in the release for those individuals. Next slide. These requirements for releases will create some logistical complications, as you might imagine. One of the provisions that has been set out in the agreement is the wording that's set forth in red on this slide. You are under an obligation to get a good faith effort to obtain releases from former owners or operators, if there are any such. And actually the former owners will be obligated, if they are the ones entitled to the distribution, to obtain releases from you. In talking with the Department of Health, what they are looking for is execution of your release, as well as some substantiation, some proof that you've actually made good faith efforts to obtain necessary releases from former owners, and that will be also an obligation on the part of former owners. And you will also be asked to provide a copy of your purchase and sale agreement. You may wish to contact them, the former entities, to discuss the situation and see if you can obtain it. It is recommended that you try by email, some way that you can prove that you reached out and attempted to obtain a release. If you are unable to, proof of your attempts will be considered the satisfaction of the good faith effort by the department.
I think,
But this
John,
is obviously
this is where this is where, because we don't know, we have not confirmed yet whether they're going to send the agreement out via the health commerce system or whether they're going to try to use the signing days and have the agreements there available, which I think would be awkward, you know, because there's little chance to review at that point. Like I said, there may be some errors in the schedules. But these issues with old owners, new owners, and releases are likely to extend beyond, you know, the December 5th date. So if there are submittals that are made before December 5th, they will still have to be vetted by Matt Leonardo and company at DOH. So, you know, if you do have enough information, you know, to supply, such as the asset purchase agreement, we recommend that that be included, that you have that in hand, along with your analysis of why the facility is entitled, or the old owner or new owner is entitled to XYZ part of the settlement. And so, you know, this is going to be a logistical issue. We're not sure whether they're thinking that they're going to have all of the agreements in a stack on a signing day, or those signing days are going to be opportunities for you to come in front of Mr. Leonardo, who's the attorney at DOH, go through and get an approval of your release at that point. Go ahead, John.
Next slide. As we said, the turnaround is very short. December 5th is the due date. The state would like substantial compliance with that date. And you're responsible for providing not only your signed agreements, but also all the releases that we discussed. And Raul mentioned to enable this to go forward as quickly as possible, DOH has set up these signing dates. You can see where they are: New York City, Rochester, and Albany. And as he said, Matt will be there, Matt Leonardo. That way you'll be assured that it's all in order if you sign in front of them. However, if you have any questions, it's likely that they will not be providing legal advice concerning those. So take that into account when you determine how you wish to process this going forward. And again, I would suggest that you look at your emails, look in the HCN, keep checking. There is a slight possibility they'll send them out by mail as well, but I wouldn't count on it. Next slide.
And in the end, for our clients, we will be reaching out to Matt Leonardo to make sure that if there's anyone that has missed this for whatever reason, or they made a mistake, and I would assume there will be mistakes, that we get the appropriate documents over to DOH before that deadline for the facilities that are wanting to go forward with the settlement. On our data, in our data room, and we'll be sending links to that data room. Once we obtain the final releases tomorrow and the final version of the settlement, we're going to post that as well, so you can start taking a look at the final version of the settlement. We have earlier versions in our data room made available previously, but I think it would be helpful in advance to take a good look at this agreement. Along with there's likely to be some proof in terms of the authorized signatory for the releases, who will be authorized from the perspective of DOH to sign on behalf of the facility. So again, if you have proof on that, and we'll provide some guidance once we see the final release of what you would need, just to make things go as smoothly as possible. Those items will be posted up. And as John indicated, by now everyone has a listing of what's been excluded in terms of the rate appeals, litigation, and the OMIG audits that are going to be off the table. You are giving up your right to sue as part of this agreement to have any excluded rate appeals processed. You're not giving up your right to sue if they process them against you. If they deny you a rate appeal, then you would have a right to litigate that. But you will not have a right to mandate that they process them. They're going to process those rate appeals in accordance with the triage system that they've set up in terms of financial need and other pressures on facilities. With regard to OMIG, they are giving up the listed items in terms of OMIG audits, they being OMIG. So they're waiving their rights with regard to the designated OMIG audits and matters. They may have already recouped those monies from facilities, in which case that money, once the settlement is signed, is due back to the facilities. And you're not giving up your right to chase that money down because there is no time frame for that in the agreement. So that's going to be another pressure point. However, it's open game in terms of getting that money back from OMIG. I'll shoot it back over to John at this point.
Okay. As you can see, when and if these payments are finally approved by the state, the payments will not be going directly to facilities. Instead, it's been decided that there will be escrow agents approved and designated by Leading Age and NISHVA. It's the two law firms listed. The funds will go into their accounts, their escrow accounts, and then upon direction from the state that there has been universality determined, as well as the releases, and particularly the releases are in proper order and complete, the money will be distributed as one-time payments on each of the installments for the 5 years. Next slide. I guess that's about it. If we'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have, particularly after you receive the package from DOH. I think you're going to find it's a long, complicated agreement. We vetted it here. However, I'm sure you'll still have some additional questions once you look at it and have reviewed the appendices and releases as well.
Abby, I think, I don't know if you were getting any questions.
No questions so far.
Okay. Okay, great. So we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have individually after this, and we'll provide another update on our data center or data room following tomorrow's conference call. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.